Yeah, we back. Now today's gonna be a quick video. Gonna be responding to a request from a subscriber. Take a look up on the screen. This brother said, Nefakari, please make a video on the governance or the short administration under Dessalines. We don't hear much of it. Now, a while back, I think over a year ago, go to my playlist section. I have a playlist entitled The Memoirs of Dessalines' Secretary. And you're going to get a first-hand account, a first-person account testimony of the revolution from the perspective of Dessalines' secretary, one of his close associates in his inner circle. Go check it out. A very classic series that I released a while back. Now, in today's video, we're going to be reading some letters that Dessalines wrote himself over 200 years ago, letters that he wrote during the revolution, during those first early years when he was establishing his government. We're going to be reading those first-hand accounts that Dessalines wrote with his own hand. Now, when it comes to Dessalines, it's not as easy to find information, letters, documents that he wrote because a lot of it is scattered. A lot of it is all over the place, right? When it comes to Christophe, it's easier to find letters, documents, and writings from his time because Christophe left a lot of letters behind, a lot of documents, correspondence. He published a series of books under his regime. So when it comes to Christophe, there's a treasure trove of information that was left behind. When it comes to Dessalines, you got to do a lot of digging. You got to do a lot of searching. Some of it is in Europe. Some of it is over here. Some of it is in the United States, the Library of Congress. It's all over the goddamn place. Now, anyways, man, let's get into it, right? In today's video, we're going to examine a few documents. Maybe I might come back with, multiple videos, might turn this into a series. Who knows? But anyways, let's get into it. Now, before we get started, you already know, album out now. Album available everywhere. Apple Music, Spotify. Go to the homepage of my YouTube channel, my playlist section, Sahel1816. Enjoy yourself, man. Cash App in the description. Support the channel. Now let's get back into it. Now, the first letter that we're going to get into, it takes us to the year 1799, right? Now, what was happening during the year 1799? It was the War of Knives, right? Between the North and the South. Between Toussaint Louverture versus his rival in the South, André Rigaud. Take a look up on the screen, the two key players in the conflict. Toussaint Louverture, the former slave who rose to become a powerful military leader and the de facto ruler of the northern part of Saint-Domingue, that's the colony, versus his rival, André Rigaud, a mixed-race free person of color who controlled the southern part of the colony and had his own army and his own supporters. Now, a lot of people don't know, but the 1799 Civil War between the North and the South was actually one of the most devastating military campaigns in the entire revolution. Now, why did that war break out between the two factions? Well, you got to delve into the mindset of the two men that were fighting, right? If you watched my video yesterday, then you remember when I spoke about the different demographics on the island during that time. In the North, you had a more concentration of the formerly enslaved blacks that used to work on them sugar plantations in the North, right? And in the South, these were the sons and daughters of the French colonists. These were those who had education. These were those who might have owned land, might have owned slaves, right? Might have had family connections over in France. So over time during the colony, there were two different demographics that emerged between the North and the South. And when it came to André Rigaud, he was the man in the South. He was the de facto ruler of the South. And in the colony, there was always a strict racial hierarchy, with the Europeans usually at the top, their mixed race offspring somewhere in the middle, and the blacks always on the bottom. Now, here comes these black generals in the North, right? They taking over power. They taking over territory. They having money. They having beautiful women. They riding in multi-horse carriages. They doing their thing. They owning property, owning estates, owning big mansions in the North, right? So they doing their thing. So André Rigaud, from his perspective in the South, he doesn't understand what's going on. He doesn't understand what's happening. He's not really comfortable with the idea of being ruled over by the black man. He felt that if the black generals from the North took over, then that would be a threat to his class of people, right? That would be a threat to the wealth and the power and the influence of the South. Because even though the men of mixed race did not have much political power, they had a lot of economic power. Many times inheriting the land, the money, and the businesses left behind by the European fathers. So by the late 1700s, there was already a class of mixed race men in the South that had already established a formidable economic base, with André Rigaud being one of the most prominent mixed race men on the colony. So when André Rigaud declared war against Toussaint Louverture and the black generals from the North, he did so to protect his economic interests. Take a look up on the screen. On June 16, 1799, Rigaud attacked the town of Petit Goave, putting many people to death with the sword. It was from Rigaud's violence with the sword that the Civil War got its name, the War of Knives. The first 5 months of war were characterized by gruesome excesses on both sides. Now, eventually, after about a year's worth of combat, the black generals from the North were successful, and Rigaud and his men were driven into exile. Now, let's get into a letter that Dessalines had wrote to Christophe during the war, right? During the War of Knives in 1799, right? This is a letter that Dessalines wrote to Christophe. Let's get into it. At the top, Dessalines, Commander-in-Chief of the West, to Brigade Chief Henry Christophe, Commander-in-Chief of the Cap. My dear comrade, as unfortunate as the recent incident may be concerning the Chief of Brigade, Charles Belair, commander of one of the cordon camps that I established, I must inform you of it so that, convinced of the secretive maneuvers of the traitor Rigaud and his agents, you can avoid the traps they might set for you. While commanding the Milton camp, Charles Belair, leading the 7th Half Brigade and keeping the rebels at bay, stood strong with an imposing front. Too cowardly to face him directly, the traitor Rigaud used deception, his favorite tactic, to try to ensnare this officer, whose bravery and fearlessness he knew well. A so-called plantation overseer approached the camp under Belair's command, requesting to speak with him, posing as the leader of a group of cultivators who were going to surrender. He complained bitterly about Rigaud, who he said had found them all plunged in the most miserable misery in an asylum without existence. The farmers only asking to return their wives and children to their homes to resume their work. He was, he said, sent by them to the chief of the bandits, Charles Belair, to obtain their pardon. The desire to bring back these lost brothers made this officer fall into the trap that was set for him. He welcomed this scoundrel and sent him back to the farmers, whose envoy he said he was, after giving him some refreshments that he had requested for several wounded people that he said he had in the woods. This treacherous man returned the next day to thank him on behalf of these so-called cultivators and to ask him to come to them so that they could see him and be assured that they'll be well received. Well, replied General Charles Belair, I'm going to go to them with 4 of my men. Commander, replied this traitor, this measure, far from being useful, would destroy the success of the project you are planning, as the majority is composed only of women and children. The approach of an armed force will intimidate them, and far from surrendering to you, they will disperse into the woods. Instead, meet with your headquarters. This measure is the wisest and is the only one that can succeed for you. Now, time out. So it seems that Dessalines is describing an event to Christophe where General Charles Belair had fell into a trap that was set by Andre Rigaud. So this farmer had approached General Charles Belair like, hey, General Charles Belair, tried to approach him in a friendly manner. And I guess he ended up falling into a trap. Now let's continue. Overconfident in this scoundrel, this officer, yielding to his cunning solicitations, leaves the head of 14 officers of his corps and followed this unfaithful guide, who, after having him posted by various impassable paths, leads him to a place where a very rickety camp was located, in which one could only go up and down by means of a ladder. It was there, he said, where the men, women, and children who wanted to surrender were gathered, and they had established this entrenchment only for their preservation. Too far advanced to retreat, and without reflecting on the dangers to which they exposed themselves, he orders his officers to enter this camp, but scarcely had a party descended when a weapon was shot. A signal of premeditated treason is heard. These officers then find, instead of farmers, armed men of color who plunge their murderous daggers into their hearts. Brigade Chief Charles Belair, who had not yet mounted, abandoned his horse and escaped the death that was planned for him when he killed with a pistol a mulatto who raised his deadly iron against him. Several deserting soldiers from the enemy assured us that all these brave officers were victims. I have from these same men the news that the majority of the whites who were in the South have been assassinated, and that Rigaud had given the order to the farmers to assassinate the few who remained as soon as they were certain of the capture of the mole. Now, the mole, I believe they're talking about Mole Saint Nicolas. Now, let's continue. May this marked trait of perfidy make you aware of the enemy that we have to fight, the wickedness of the men of color in the southern part, and what we have reason to expect from them. Such barbaric beings are unworthy of any pardon. National vengeance must fall heavily upon them, and all good citizens must unite in mass to prevent them from carrying out their destructive projects. It is very unfortunate that the men of color in the South do not behave like those who make up the army whose command is entrusted to them, mainly the brave officers who have known by their obedience, their good conduct, and their courage to deserve the esteem and the confidence of the general-in-chief, mine and that of all good citizens. So time out. So during the war between the North and the South, Dessalines in this letter actually makes a separation between the mulatto generals, the commanders in the South, versus the rank and file soldiers under their command, right? He says the mulatto generals themselves are traitorous and deceitful, but the rank and file soldiers under their command are brave and respectable, obedient, brave. We respect those men. But the commanders themselves, we don't rock with them. Barbarians and national vengeance must be rained down upon them. Now, let's continue. Now, I believe this next letter from Dessalines is coming in June 1800. I believe it's June 1800. Now let's get into it. This is a letter from Dessalines, and he's writing this letter to Toussaint Louverture, the commander-in-chief, the supreme commander of the colony. Now let's continue. Dessalines said, I learned from the refugees who had deserted us last night that Rigaud had advanced with a number of troops into the plain de Fourdeneg, and that their infantry was encamped upon a neighboring plantation to that in which I had fixed the headquarters of the army with 2 pieces of cannon, 4-pounders, and that the cavalry was upon another a little farther off, with Rigaud, who had came yesterday to where his infantry was, and administered an oath to everyone to die upon their entrenchments rather than to make one retrograde step or abandon the 2 pieces of cannon. The fever having permitted me to rise this morning, I ordered the chief of brigade, Dommage, to take the command of the column, leaving only at the headquarters the 1st battalions of the 4th and 7th demi-brigades, and to march with the remainder of the troops to dislodge the enemy who were too close to us, and enjoin him particularly not to return to me without the 2 pieces of cannon which Rigaud's troops had sworn not to abandon. The combat was bloody. The rebels defended for 2 entire hours with the 2 pieces of cannon, but the 10th demi-brigade carried one, and while the enemy was defending the other one valiantly, the 4th demi-brigade with its accustomed bravery carried off the other and put the whole army to flight. A number of the rebels fell upon the field, and the rest found safety by flight into the neighboring woods. The 2 pieces of cannon have just arrived at the headquarters. They are in fine order to serve against Rigaud on some other occasion. Nah, time out. Time out. So basically, Dessalines is basically letting Toussaint Louverture know. He's basically getting him up to date with some updates, basically saying, we just smashed Rigaud. We just ran off with some of his cannons, right? We just captured some 2-pounder cannons from Rigaud and put his whole army to flight. So basically, this is a victorious letter that Dessalines is sending to Toussaint, basically saying, listen, big bro, we just smashed Rigaud. We just ran off with some 2-pounder cannons. We got some brand new artillery, big bro. We just crushed Rigaud. Now let's continue. The 2-pounder cannons have just arrived at the headquarters. They are in fine order to serve against Rigaud on some other occasion, who, with his cavalry, not wishing to stand the flock of our brave troops, took refuge in the town of Vaquin. We have but few wounded, and those slightly. We have made a number of prisoners, taken a quantity of biscuits, 800 flints, 54 8-pounder cannon cartridges, meant without doubt for the piece we took at St. Michael's. Now, time out. I think in that part they're talking about Saint Michel, not St. Michael. But anyway, let's continue. The 3rd demi-brigade of the South, which had arrived from Côte de Fay, was coming up to reinforce Rigaud, but arrived too late. The 3rd battalion of our 4th demi-brigade charged them within pistol shot and put them to flight. Our cavalry pursued them and took one of their standards, which I send you. I send you also 7 prisoners that we took in the action of today. You will find under the enclosed a proclamation of Rigaud, which we had found. At this moment, I am seized with a fever and must retire to my bed. I wish you more health, General, than I myself currently enjoy. Health and respect. Signed, Dessalines. Now, as you can see, that was Dessalines, getting Toussaint up to date with some, military updates, military operations. We just smashed Rigaud. We just captured some brand new artillery. We had them boys running, put the whole army to flight. You feel me? Let's continue. Now, this next letter from Dessalines, I believe it was printed in the Federal Gazette. I think it was this was a newspaper out of Philadelphia, the Federal Gazette. It had printed a letter from Dessalines. Take a look up on the screen. At the top, the headline says this: the report of General Dessalines, Commander-in-Chief of the Army of the West, against the rebels in the Department of the South, to the General-in-Chief of the Army of Saint Domingo. So I'm assuming this is a letter from Dessalines to Toussaint, because I'm assuming he is the Commander-in-Chief of the Army of Saint Domingo. Now, let's continue. Dessalines said this: my General, I marched this morning with the remainder of the right column and that of the left to occupy the heights of the direct plantation, where the 6th, 7th, 9th, 10th demi-brigades were encamped. Having arrived there, I saw the enemy in great numbers encamped on the plantation and in the plains of Vaquin. I formed the right column into 3 divisions, the right commanded by the Chief of Brigade, Laurent Désir, and the center by the Chief of Brigade, Paul Louverture, and the left by the Chief of Brigade, Dommage. These 3 divisions began their march for the plantation. The 1st division had scarcely arrived at the destination, the others being still on their march, when the enemy, fleeing this maneuver, made a sally from the plantation and took flight. The division commanded by Dommage fell in and engaged with them, but the affair was not serious until the arrival at Aken. There the enemy then rallied and gave battle. The 4th and 8th demi-brigades, which were in advance, sustained the fire of the enemy for 2 hours. When the other 2 divisions, having come up with the enemy, he was beaten and put to rout. I ordered the cavalry to advance, who made a great slaughter, and the enemy were pursued to the seashore, where a number of them who attempted to embark were destroyed in the water or among the reeds. I returned and ordered the column under General La Plume, which had not been engaged, to march ahead on the great road to Lecay, in order again to pursue the enemy to a certain distance. But at the instant I arrived in the town, another column of the enemy, which had sallied out from Ensavo, attempted to take us by surprise, and I had scarcely time to draw up the 3rd Battalion of the 4th Demi Brigade when he made his attack. He was, however, quickly repulsed. I made in this last affair many prisoners, who I sent to you, among others, the brigade chief Piveger, 2 pairs of colors, and 1 brass 4-pounder cannons. Piveger has been wounded, and I have given him all the assistance in my power. Many of the white and colored inhabitants of the parish of Aken have flocked to us, and I have treated them with all the compassion and humanity which you have prescribed in your instructions. We have taken the portfolio of Rigaud and the copies of his letters, and he narrowly escaped being taken prisoner himself. We have also found in one of the forts on the seashore 2 24-pounder cannons and 1 magazine filled with ammunition. I cannot inform you of the quantity, as I have now a fever at the moment of the writing. Health and respect. Signed, Dessalines. Now, once again, another victorious letter. Dessalines basically telling Toussaint Louverture that, we basically marched on the enemy today victoriously. The enemy took flight, and we almost captured Rigaud himself. And on top of that, we captured more ammunition, we captured more artillery, we captured more cannons, and I'm about to send you some more prisoners as well. Now let's continue. Now, this next letter from Dessalines is coming, I believe, in the summer of 1803, right? So as you can see, independence is right around the corner. Victory is right on the horizon, right? So September 1803, I believe that the French would be defeated in November 1803. Now, let's get into it. From the headquarters at Croix de Bouquet to the inhabitants of Port-au-Prince, I believe September 19th, 1803. Citizens of all classes, there is still time to rally under our banners, beneath which you will find safety, protection, and loyalty. Consider, citizens, that this is the final step dictated by the humanity that will always guide me in your favor. And if you do not take advantage of this, you will have only yourselves to blame for the misfortunes that threaten you. Yesterday, I calmly received the surrender of the garrisons at Douillard, Sancto, Damiens, and Croix de Bouquet. My severity was directed only at the soldiers who preferred to follow the path of our tyrants. I have the honor to salute you. Signed, Dessalines. Now, that was a letter that Dessalines had given to the citizens of Port-au-Prince. Now, this next letter is to the citizens of the Cap, right? The citizens up north. And I believe this letter was on the 19th of November, 1803, right? So I believe the French have just been defeated, I think like the day before. So the French have just been defeated yesterday. Now, Dessalines made this announcement to the citizens of the Cap, the citizens in the north, the day after. He said this: to the citizens and residents of the city of the Cap. Citizens, as I'm currently negotiating with the General-in-Chief Rochambeau for the evacuation of the city of the Cap by his troops, I believe it is my duty to reassure you, citizens and residents, regarding any fears you may have. The war that we have waged up until this point has been entirely directed against the foreign occupiers of this unfortunate colony. I have always offered safety and protection to all residents regardless of where they were, and I will continue to do so on this occasion. The manner in which the inhabitants of all colors in Jérémie, Lecay, and Port-au-Prince have been received is a guarantee of my loyalty. I will never cease to be a citizen who seeks only to rid the land of the remaining usurpers. Under my government, you will find justice and protection for your persons and your property, for the honor of being free. Signed, Dessalines. Now, this next letter written by Dessalines, I believe it was written to a gentleman by the name of Edward Courbet, who I believe was an agent of the British government. I think he was the charge d'affaires and the consul general of the King of England. And I believe this letter was written shortly after independence. Dessalines said this: to Monsieur Edward Courbet, charge d'affaires and consul general of His Britannic Majesty. I have read with all the attention it deserves the letter dated on this day that you have the honor of writing to me. His Excellency, the Admiral and the Governor of Jamaica, has both rightly acquired my esteem and trust. Nothing will stop me from responding to the wishes they have expressed, except what would compromise my authority, or what would infringe on the sovereign rights of Saint-Domingue under my government. The object of your dispatch, sir, concerns the proposal by your government to take possession of the town of Mont-Saint-Nicolas, a proposition which had already been made to me by Monsieur Cathcart. I then stated that this place was not within my power to concede. I have continued to express to those gentlemen my opposition to any foreign garrison being stationed on any part of the island. Hold up, now time out. Now we see, the early instances of Dessalines engaged in, diplomacy, right? We know Dessalines as the, frontline commander on the battlefield, but now we are getting to know Dessalines the diplomat, right? Dessalines the head of state engaging in international diplomacy. Now let's continue. This request obliges me to make the firm and solemn resolution of informing the British government that I cannot, under any circumstances, allow a military foothold which would offer no advantage to my country. I have therefore issued the strictest orders that this place remain in the same state as other ports of the Republic under my full authority. I have the honor to inform you that I am also aware that the construction works being carried out at the harbor of the Mole are too far advanced for me to allow any contrary installation. Rest assured, sir, that the request from the British government does not arouse any mistrust in me towards their good faith. I fully appreciate the desire for the safety of their colonies, the honor they do to the friendship of our nations, and their natural enmity towards the French. I hope you will relay these noble sentiments to the ministers of His Britannic Majesty, and that they'll understand that I am in the unfortunate position of refusing to grant this location to the English government, not due to hostilities, but out of a sincere interest in preserving the independence and sovereignty of my country. I therefore ask you, sir, to communicate to His Excellency the Admiral and Governor of Jamaica the reasons which prevent me from agreeing to their request at this time. I have the honor to be, with all due consideration, signed, Dessalines. Written on the eve of January 1st, 1804. Now, to close out this video, we're going to get into the military code under Dessalines' government, right? The penal code for the troops of the military, for the armed forces. What were the guidelines? What were the rules and regulations for the military, for the revolutionary military of the country? Now, let's continue. Let's get into it. Take a look up on the screen. The military penal code for all the troops of the Empire of Haiti. Let's get into it. Jacques, the first emperor of Haiti and the supreme head of the army, by the natural grace of God and the constitutional law of the state, considering that the violation of duty, if it is not severely repressed by the law, can only lead to the most outrageous license and hence to enslavement, a people whose liberty has been purchased by the blood of so many heroes, wanting to preserve for the soldiers of his armies the purity of those sentiments which made them act, and to convince them that, without honor, loyalty, obedience, and subordination, armies are nothing more than hordes of brigands. Finally, wanting to purge the free armies of Haiti of men who could only dishonor them if they continued a service that honor reproves, orders the following. Any soldier, that is to say from the army general up to and including the soldier or any other individual attached to the army or its retinue who goes over to the enemy without written authorization from his superiors shall be punished by death. Any soldier or other individual attached to the army or its retinue who, without an order or written permission from his superior, crosses the boundaries fixed by the commander of the troop to which he belongs on the sides by which communication with the enemy could be possible, shall be deemed a deserter to the enemy and as such punished by death. Any soldier or other individual attached to the army and its retinue who leaves a place besieged or invested by the enemy without having obtained written permission from the commander of the place shall also be deemed a deserter to the enemy and punished by death. Any soldier who, while on sentry duty or in the presence of the enemy, abandons his post without fulfilling his orders and thinks only of his own safety shall be punished by death. Any soldier or other individual employed in the army or its entourage who is convicted of having incited his comrades to go over to the enemy shall be deemed the head of a conspiracy and punished by death, even if desertion has not taken place. When soldiers have formed a conspiracy to go over to the enemy, the highest ranking military accomplice, or with equal rank the longest serving, shall be deemed the head of the conspiracy and punished as such. Any accomplice who reveals a conspiracy may not be prosecuted or punished for the crime he has discovered. Any soldier or individual in the army, regardless of his status or rank, convicted of treason shall be punished by death. Any hirer or accomplice in hiring for the enemy or for the rebels shall be punished by death. Any individual, regardless of their status, quality, or profession, convicted of spying for the enemy or for the rebels shall be punished by death. Any foreigner caught drawing up plans of the camps, quarters, cantonments, fortifications, arsenals, stores, factories, canals, rivers, and generally anything related to the defense and conservation of the territory and its communication shall be arrested as a spy and punished by death. Any soldier who is convicted of having, in an affair with the enemy, cowardly abandoned or thrown away his weapons will be punished by death. Any soldier who, in a city taken by assault, leaves his post to engage in pillage will be punished by death. Any troop which, being ordered to march or give against the enemy, or for any other service ordered by the leader refuses to obey shall be declared in revolt and treated in accordance with the revisions of Article 3. Any soldier or other individual attached to the army who, being ordered to march against the enemy or for any other service ordered by the leader in the presence of the enemy and in an affair formally refuses to obey shall be punished by death. The death sentence shall be carried out militarily as follows: 4 sergeants, 4 corporals, and 4 shooters, the longest serving, shall be commanded, taken in turn from the defendant's troop as far as possible. Otherwise, always from the troop present at the place where the execution is to take place. These 12 soldiers shall be placed in 2 ranks. They are responsible for firing at the culprit when the signal is given to them by the adjutant. The execution shall take place in a place designated for this purpose, in the presence of the defendant's troop, when it is on the spot, which shall be drawn up in the battle formation and unarmed, otherwise in the presence of the troop that provided the shooters. One of the judges from the special council who applied the law will always be present at the execution. A picket of 24 armed men will be commanded to lead the guilty party to the place of execution and ensure the maintenance of the order and police that must prevail in these types of executions. Now we're going to get into a proclamation that Dessalines gave to the entire country, I believe in the spring of 1804, right? Dessalines to the entire nation. Dessalines said this: "Such previously unheard of crimes made nature shudder. The measure was at its height. Finally, the hour of vengeance has struck, and the implacable enemies of human rights have suffered the punishment due to their crimes. I raised my arm, held too long over their guilty heads. At this signal, which is a just God provoked, your hands, wholly armed, brought the axe to the ancient tree of slavery and prejudice. Envious of time and above all, the infernal policy of the Europeans has surrounded it with triple bronze. You stripped off its armor. You placed it on your heart to become like your natural enemies, cruel, pitiless, such that an overflowing torrent that roars, uproots, drags away your vengeful ardor, has swept everything away in its impetuous course. Thus perished every tyrant, every oppressor of the human race. What then? Bent for centuries under an iron yoke, playthings of men's passions, of their injustice and the whims of fate, mutilated victims of the greed of the French whites, after having fattened these insatiable leeches with our sweat, with unparalleled patience and resignation, we would have still seen this sacrilegious herd attempt our destruction without distinction of gender or age, and we would not have plunged our desperate arms into their bosom. Who is this vile Haitian, so unworthy of his regeneration, who does not believe he has fulfilled the eternal decrees by exterminating these bloodthirsty tigers? If there is one, let him move away. Indignant nature rejects him from our bosom. Let him go and hide his shame far from these places. The air that one breathes, there is not made for his gross organs. It is the pure air of august and triumphant liberty. Yes, we have repaid these true cannibals, war for war, crimes for crimes, outrage for outrage. Yes, I have saved my country. I have avenged the Americas. My pride and my glory lie in the confession I make of it before mortals and gods. What does it matter what judgment contemporary of future races will pronounce upon me? I have done my duty. My self-esteem remains. It is enough for me. But what am I saying? The preservation of my unfortunate brothers, the testimony of my conscience are not my only reward. I have seen 2 classes of men born to love each other, to help each other, to rescue each other, finally mixed and blended together, rushing to revenge, depriving each other of the honor of the first blows, blacks and yellows, whom the refined duplicity of the Europeans fought for so long to divide us. You who are today but one family, have no doubt your perfect reconciliation had to be sealed in the blood of your executioners. The same calamities have weighed on your prescribed heads. The same honor to flay your enemies have signaled you. The same fate is reserved for you. The same interest must therefore keep you forever one, indivisible and inseparable. Maintain this precious concord, this happy harmony amongst you. It is the pledge of your happiness, your salvation, your successes. It is the secret of being invincible. To tighten these knots, it is necessary to retrace for you the course of the atrocities committed against our species, the massacre of the entire population of this island. Meditate it in the silence and composure of this study, the execution of this dreadful project shamelessly proposed to me and already begun by the French with that calm and serene front, accustomed to such crimes. Guadeloupe sacked and destroyed, its ruins still smoking with the blood of children, women, and old people put to the sword. Now, keep in mind, when the French invaded the colony of Saint-Domingue, when they invaded Haiti in 1802 and they were defeated, they also had sent some troops over to Guadeloupe, because in Guadeloupe, the blacks over there were also in revolts against the French. But the revolt in Guadeloupe was put down by the French. right? So it was unsuccessful, but the revolt in Haiti was successful. That's why Dessalines had said, Guadeloupe, sacked and destroyed, its ruins still smoking with the blood of children, women, and old people put to the sword, right? Because the French had went and, destroyed the family in Guadeloupe in order to put down the rebellion. But unfortunately for the French, they could not put down the rebellion that occurred in Haiti at the same time. Now let's continue. The brave General Delgrès carried into the air with the debris of his fort rather than to accept the irons. Generous warrior, your noble death, far from astonishing our courage, only irritates in us the thirst to avenge you or follow you. Now, when Dessalines made a reference to General Delgrès, let's talk about General Delgrès for a second. Let's pay homage to the ancestor, right? Take a look up on the screen. The French army, led by General Richepanse, drove Delgrès into Fort Saint-Charles, which was held by formerly enslaved Guadeloupeans. After realizing that he could not prevail and refusing to surrender, Delgrès was left with roughly 1,000 men and some women. At the Battle of Matuba on the 28th of May, 1802, Delgrès and some of his followers ignited their gunpowder stores, committing suicide in the process in an attempt to kill as many French troops as possible. One of his followers, the fearless pregnant warrior, Solitude, who was injured in the explosion and later captured and decapitated by the French on November 30th, the day after the birth of her child at the age of 30. Her last words were, "Live free or die," which became the mantra of the resistance. Now, as you can see, General Delgrès, that's who Dessalines was paying homage to, right? Because General Delgrès, when he was surrounded by the French during his rebellion, he decided to commit suicide by igniting his gunpowder instead of surrendering to the enemy. That's why Dessalines paid homage. And Dessalines was like, listen, we want to avenge the honor of Delgrès. Now let's continue. Will I again remind you of the plots recently hatched in the town of Jérémie, the terrible explosion which was to result from it, despite the generous pardon granted to these incorrigible beings upon the expulsion of the French army. Their emissaries have responded to them appropriately in all the cities to stir up a new war. The deplorable fate of our brothers deported to Europe. Finally, the appalling despotism, precursor of death, exercised in Martinique. Unfortunate Martinicans, can I not fly to your aid and break your chains? Blaze, an invincible obstacle separates us, but perhaps a spark from the fire that engulfs us will spring into your soul. Perhaps at the sound of this commotion, awakened from your lethargy, you will claim, souls in hand, your rights sacred and imprescriptible. After the terrible examples that I have just given, that sooner or later divine justice unleashes on earth those strong souls above the weaknesses of the common people, for the loss and terror of the wicked. Tremble. Tyrants, usurpers, scourges of the new world, our daggers are sharpened, your tortures are ready. 60,000 men equipped, seasoned, docile to our orders, burn to offer a new holocaust to the minds of their slaughtered brothers. May this power come, mad enough and dare to attack me. Already at its approach, the irritated genius of Haiti, emerging from the bosom of the seas, appears. Its threatening brow raises the waves, excites the storms. Its powerful hand breaks or disperses the ships. To its formidable voice, the laws of nature obey. Diseases, the plague, the devouring sun, fire, poison, fly in its wake. But why count on the help of the climate and the elements? Have I forgotten that I command uncommon souls nurtured in adversity, whose audacity is irritated by obstacles, increased by dangers? Why are these murderous cohorts coming? I await them firmly with a fixed eye. I readily abandon to them the shore and the place where cities once existed. But woe to anyone who comes too close to the mountains. It will be better for him if the sea had swallowed him up in its deep abysses and to be devoured by the anger of the children of Haiti. War to the death against tyrants. That is my motto. Liberty, independence. That is our rallying cry. Generals, officers, soldiers. Little like the one who preceded me, the ex-general Toussaint Louverture. I have been faithful to the promise I made to you when I took up arms against tyranny, and as long as a remnant of breath animates me, I will keep this oath. No colonist or European will ever set foot on this territory as a master or as an owner. This resolution will henceforth be the fundamental basis of our Constitution. If other leaders after me dig their own graves and those of their peers by conducting themselves in a manner diametrically opposed to mine, you will only blame the inevitable law of destiny, which will have deprived me of the happiness and salvation of my fellow citizens. But may my successors follow the path that I have traced for them. It is the system most likely to consolidate their power. It is the most worthy homage they'll be able to pay to my memory. Now, listen, as you can see, obviously, after Dessalines died, Christophe obviously followed in his footsteps. But unfortunately, them boys from the South, them boys in the South, unfortunately, the sons of the French colonists, they did not have the same uncompromising demeanor, right? You see, when it came to Christophe stood firm. Christophe stood tall in front of the European, right? When the French colonists came to Christophe's territory in 1814, Christophe killed the French ambassador. Unfortunately, the boys in the South, they did not keep that same energy, unfortunately. And as a result, we have suffered the consequences as Dessalines intelligently predicted in his proclamation. Now, I'm not going to be here too long. I already been here long enough, damn near 40 minutes. Now, maybe I might come back with a part 2, maybe a part 3 as I continue to do my research and dig for more documents as we come and bring it to the channel, bring it to the public. You know, we're going to bring back the writings of their ancestors. So, yeah, you know, it's part 1. And we're going to see if I come back with a part 2 or part 3. Anyways, man, this is whenever Kari Dessalines. Support the album. Album out now. Sahel 1816. You already know what it is. Now, Cash App in the description. Show love to the channel. Support the channel so we can keep it going. Now, I'm gone. Peace.
Took on my losses and now I got racks. Took on my losses and made that shit back. Plan to make gold, I need plenty of plaques. Making my enemies empty the stash. Feel like a me, I feel like Chiani. African gold is all over my body. African diamonds adorning my fingers. African kid when you look at my features. Enemy watching, I gotta get paid. Enemy watching and stalking my page. Watching my moves and they study my ways. Copy my energy, riding my wave. Enemy watching me like an obsession. Heart of a king, I don't need no acceptance. No, they gon' try but can't stop the progression. No, they gon' try but can't stop the ascension. Foot on the gas and I gotta go hard. Straight to the top, I've been down for too long. Plotting revenge, I'ma make them regret it. Ain't no more talking, I got too much leverage. Talking uranium, diamonds and gold. Keep that shit real, I wish death on my foes. Keep that shit real, I ain't blocking my blessings. Stacking my profit and then I invest it. Feeling untouchable, energy sacred. When I pull up, know my enemies hate. Setting up shop at a secret location. Chopper gon' sound like a standing ovation. Moving in silence, I never been regular. One of a kind, I ain't got no competitors. Son of a king, I'm the kingdom inheritor. Do what I want, I don't care what you telling us. Say to myself, me and my team. Walk in the spot, but they knowin' my name. Beautiful passenger, bet she gon' ride.